What's going on, everyone? AP over here at Rumpier Sports, bringing to you once again the Lineup Builder Show. I'm here with my guy Jordan in Sabersim, our partner. Jordan, what's going on, my man? How's your week going?
It's good, man. Flying by once again. Having a good week so far. Excited to break down the NBA slate a little bit here today. Maybe get into some other sports too. So yeah, no, just looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, before we started, we were both just talking about how this week is flying by. It really is. I mean, we're into March. It's just crazy. We got March Madness coming up. Us over at RPS, we got the RPS party here in a couple weeks. So, we're all really excited for that. But I mean, we're coming off a couple really fun NBA slates. They had the Millie Maker last night. I was on the sidelines. I did not get any seats to that. Brandon Adams, I saw. We had a member actually that was holding the top spot for a long time, and then he got passed up there at the end. Very unfortunate with Brandon Ingram going off, but he still made out pretty nicely. So shout out to our member who I think he took down 20 or 30K. But Jordan, let's first off, before we dive in, hit the like button, hit the subscribe. Helps us out a lot. If you're not a member, you should be. You can use the code AP15. It's going to get you 15% off over here at Rumpier Sports. So we're going to dive into tonight's 4-game NBA slate, and then we're also going to touch on MMA. And is there any other sport, Jordan, that should we just stick with those two, or is there?
Yeah. I think those are the two that are good for the show here today. A couple things I do want to just call out before we jump in. Our Sims, we have a bunch of different sports we support here. I know NBA getting into the latter parts of the season. Obviously, baseball starting up soon, which is a big one for us. But we haven't talked MMA in a while. It's one of our better models here, one of our better Sims. We have full support there. Obviously, NASCAR season ramping up. We've got Formula One kicking off as well here. Pretty soon, maybe even this weekend. I need to check the schedule, but I know that's getting started here pretty soon. That's another sport where we do have full simulation support for. So a lot of different things to play here. I think this time of year, NBA is always fun, right? But this time of year feels like a little bit of a transition here. So if you're looking for different sports to play or things to just mix some stuff up, maybe you want to watch the fights, play a little MMA instead of playing NBA this Saturday or something like that, right? We got all these different sports here. So I think those two are good for the show today, but we do have a lot of different Sims, a lot of different models up in the app.
Yeah, very good. Another thing, too, is even if it's a sport where the Sims aren't supported, if someone out there has their own projections, they can, upload them and still use Sabersim like a traditional optimizer, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, soccer, college sports for right now. I know those are popular requests. Those are ones we're kind of working on our end, but I think those are the big ones in terms of sports that you can just upload projections for and build. Obviously, the goal long term is to have Sims up for all these, but got to do one thing at a time there. But yes, you can upload your projections and build in Sabersim that way.
So for tonight, going back to NBA, for tonight's slate, one thing, like a good topic, I think, is there's a lot of these plays. Obviously, we're at the point in time in the NBA where everyone's adjusted. All these models are dialed in, projections are really sharp. When people get ruled out, you see these plays just get steamed up. Yesterday being a really great example with Joel Embiid getting obviously ruled out. Moved Tyrese Maxey into the starting lineup, and he was, 5,200 or right around there. Tobias Harris became a better play. I mean, if we went back 3 to 4 years, you're not going to see like Maxey 55, 60% ownership, at all. So then the other thing is then you have plays like Jared Vanderbilt, which was another popular discussion point, who was 65% owned, I think closing in on 70% in the Millie Maker. So I think maybe a good topic for today. And obviously there's a lot of news and we can't really simulate out everything with, Tyrese Halliburton's questionable. You got Branham, you got Keldon Johnson, Trey Jones questionable. So we can't simulate everything. But I think a good discussion point is how to identify chalk, when to, eat the chalk and when to fade it. And then I think part of that too, and I kind of want your opinion on this, I think part of it is just, what is your style? If your style is constantly, I'm going to be fine eating some chalk and, if it, and I'm going to find ways to get different, elsewhere, that's fine. Stick with your style and your strategy. If your strategy is, you know what? No matter what, if a player is over X% owned, I'm fading them. I don't care like how good it is. Keep in mind, it might be a bumpy ride because a lot of times in the NBA, chalk does hit, but when it doesn't, that's really when you can separate yourself. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, just that topic in general.
Yeah,
chalk, when to eat it, when to fade it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I like to do just when I sit down and look at the slate for the first time is I'll just sort by that ownership column and just get an idea of where we think the field's going to go. And then look at the value here and just see what you're getting on these guys, right? I mean, there's going to be nights here where the projections are you're getting 8x, 9x, especially later in the season, 7x value on some of these just very cheap, very underpriced guys. They're going to be chalky, right? Like the Vanderbilt situation last night, I know he kind of busted, but guy that just projected very, very well. And we can break down, why that play failed and maybe why there's some additional variance in his projection. But it was a play that projected really well, right? I think he probably in our sims ended up hitting like his 15th percentile outcome or something like that. Tonight, that's not the story, right? You're looking at these guys, 41% Benedict Mathurin here, 5.51 value, probably one of the better plays on the slate. That's not a great projection for him at 4.8. And you can even look at like the 25th percentile outcome, scoring 21 points at 4.8. That's not going to get it done even on a four game slate. So just looking at ownership versus value and just kind of looking at comparing those numbers, I think is a good way to get an idea. Is the chalk good tonight or is the chalk not so good? Because the field's going to gravitate towards the best projected plays no matter what. But there is a difference between how well those plays are projected on a night like tonight versus a night like last night. So, I mean, right off the bat for me tonight, if I was starting to, if I had to build lineups right now or slate starting in 5 minutes or something like that, I would be having a very aggressive like fade type strategy towards a lot of the chalk because there's not a lot that separates the best projected plays from a lot of the guys down here that are, going to be a lot less lower owned that actually project just marginally worse than some of the really chalky guys.
Can you actually, before we dive into our base cash build, can you highlight the Pacers guys?
Yeah.
I'm just curious because obviously Halliburton is questionable. I think our guy, Bobby Hare, believes he's going to play tonight. So, and then the other reason why Mathurin would be projected to be chalked is just, I think, matchup and his price and the ability that you can put him in the shooting guards, small forward position. Mm-hmm. Just that the flexibility that he creates. Is it Mathurin or Mathurin? Mangone, you're probably not watching this, but you got me messed up with his name, so I'm going to blame that one on Mangone. But so what I want to see here is Miles Turner. So centers have been absolutely just smashing the Spurs right now. I haven't done the flow chart yet, but I am 100% positive Miles Turner is going to be in flow chart. So, it's going to be an interesting way. Like this spot with the Pacers is just going to be interesting, especially in a matchup against the Spurs. So many different things could play out here. I'm trying to think who went off. It's like Jalen Smith. He's played like 19 and 15 minutes, and he's absolutely crushed in those minutes. So the Pacer spot tonight is definitely going to be really interesting. But let's dive in. Let's do our base build. I haven't looked at anything, so it's going to be really nice. I can kind of just, walk through. We can walk through it. And are we running a cash build? Or are we running?
So what I'm gonna do for this today, I'm gonna actually run. So basic, it's kind of like a cash build. I'm gonna run it on 001, which is gonna be very close to what the cash would do. It's almost exactly the same. It's just gonna be a little faster. We made some changes to the cash builder a couple weeks ago here to make that build find the exact mathematical optimal lineups a little more easily. It also means because it's doing that, it takes a little bit longer to build. So I think for the purpose of research, right, we're not actually trying to enter these into cash. We just want to get an idea of what the slate looks like. What are the best projected plays? I'm going to use that 001 setting on the slider, build the top 500. We'll sort by projected score just to get an idea here. So for the purposes of research, I've been doing my base builds like this a little bit more recently just because, and if you want to do 1,500, it's actually pretty fast to get up to 1,500 there as well. So, but real quick for context, I think for folks that don't really know what we're doing here, right? The purpose of this build is to get an idea of what the slate looks like, just looking at the top overall best projected plays. I think this is a really good way, even on a 4-game slate, just to get an idea how things look, who's projected well, and probably most importantly here, what's the field going to do, right? What are people building on every other optimizer on the planet going to get when they sit down and press build? Gives you an idea of where some pivots start to show up here. So let's go ahead, scroll over here. We'll start taking a look. Let's look at, maybe top 100 optimals here just to get an idea. So yeah, I mean, obviously jumps out here right at the top. You can kind of almost see a core start to open up. It's just really jamming in a lot of plays on those guys that presents just a little bit of value with where the projections are right now, right? We've got obviously Golden State still really banged up. So we've got a lot of Golden State popping in here, some Indiana, it's really just, jumping in and throwing in some of the guys that are projected like marginally better than other guys at their salary range. Not seeing that 8x value guy showing up in 100% of lineups here tonight. Pretty well spread out. I will say, a couple questionable names popping up here as well. Trey Jones, Joel Embiid, actually one of the better values here, even at 10-8 tonight. So a lot could change with this if we get some news throughout the day. Also has a lot of volatility here with some of these builds if we got some of this news after lock. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm seeing here right off the bat. I was also going to look at the stack types as well. Actually, let's do it this way. And just kind of see. I'm interested always on these smaller slates to see if people are stacking up one of these teams pretty heavily. And I mean, Pacers stacks, Warriors stacks showing up, 3 stacks for these teams showing up in 90% of our lineups combined here. So I think you can kind of get an idea of what the popular construction is going to be here for this slate.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, just look at the Pacers Spurs total, 238. If Halliburton, very good at pushing in transition, finding his guys, and that's why he is able to create so many assists. And that's why he's, at 9.2K, he'd be a phenomenal play. But this game is going to have some risks, like the Spurs rotation, like they're starting to get Charles Bassey bigger minutes. I think people are going to see that and move on to him. I love him in this spot over Zach Collins. He's 3.8. Are you getting any Charles Bassey in these kind of cash optimals that we ran?
Yeah, so I mean,
he's
just a little bit popping up there. 5% of the pool, about 4% of the top 100 here. I think a lot of times, obviously a good value here. Not too bad of an ownership projection as well. I think this is a raw points thing, right? Where at 20, 21 points here, even at 3-8, just to take up a spot in the lineup here and make up that ground somewhere else. I think that's actually really what it is, right? It's smaller slate, not a lot of pay up options. Embiid's already in a ton of these lineups already. So what do you get out of the 3-8 Charles Bassey? It's hard to pay that off sometimes.
So right off the bat and off the top of my head, we do have 2 spots I love. So just playing on the theme that we talked about right at the start, identifying chalk and then trying to make some decisions. Okay, how can we get different without, sacrificing our floor ceiling, combination? There's a few interesting spots that I've seen. So I've been smashing these Dallas overs just because with Kyrie in there, it's a hit defensively. They've lost, a few of their best defenders. And you're starting to see that. And these games just continue to nuke. I expect the exact same tonight. I expect Joel Embiid to be back. And I do think, if you saw the game yesterday, how do they not move Tyrese Maxey back into the starting lineup? The guy is so good. So good. And he's 4.9K. So if Embiid's back, I still like Harden. I still like Maxey if he starts. I'd be under on Tobias, and then PJ Tucker obviously is always going to be a fade. But I love this game, and you can run it back with Luka or Kyrie, but I don't even think you need to. I just think it's more of Dallas is, at home. They're favored by 4 points. The game's going to be competitive, and that's just going to, the back and forth, and then the expected bump. Like I'm hammering the over again on this game. 229. I think the game's going over. The overs have been crushing with them. And then the other spot too is the Warriors game. So with Russ on the Clippers, the other thing I've noticed, Russ is Russ, man. He doesn't change. He just helps the overall pace of that game. There's no way with him starting that they're slowing it down because he is constantly pushing in transition. And so that's going to be another spot. I like the Warriors there. Like I think the Clippers side is obviously much tougher to to target, but I don't hate the idea of some of these studs. But it might be something for me where the Clippers, especially, I create some rules, like definitely like Kawhi Leonard or Paul George. I just, and I'm not even high on playing them, in general. It's more so, will we get the right game environment, and will that make, say, the Warriors side a little bit better? And I think we do with the Warriors at home. They've been so good at home. And, I think it's going to make guys like Jordan Poole, DiVincenzo, maybe even Draymond a little bit interesting there. But the game I really have some interest in is Philly and the Philly side. I could see scenarios where, Harden and here. All right. So like, here's why I think you could stack it all up on one side, and you don't necessarily need a run back. Is if you look at Harden, he's going to get his guys involved. He's going to have the peripheral stats, rebounds, assists. He's going to create those opportunities. Maxey, he's just priced too low if he's in that starting lineup. And then Embiid, I think he's priced. Centers have been smashing Dallas right now too. So like, there's paths where if you get the right game environment, you could see multiple pieces from Philly go off. And so I really like that spot. And then I do have interest in the Warriors, but off the top of my head, I mean, this Pacers spot's going to be nice too. I just think there's always risks when you have, Popovich and Rick Carlisle battling, back and forth in games against each other. Just so many unpredictable things. So maybe we can mess around with that game and we can say, okay, how can we get different in this game? Charles Bassey is one. I like him. You could look at Keldon Johnson. I'm off Trey Jones. And then on the other side, maybe it's I guess if you bring up, I would have to see the Pacers side.
Yeah, pull it up.
Once again, yeah. So, okay, we got Mathurin. He's projected to be chalk. I mean, Miles Turner I like. We also like Embiid. I mean, what are you seeing here on this Pacers side?
Yeah, so I mean, it's tough, right? I think these situations where you've got the value plays that are going to be a lot of the chalk here, right? I mean, so it looks like Mathurin, Healed, right? Those plays are only going to get better if Tyrese Halliburton sits. I think the way I would play this game, at least at lock here, is I might give a bump to a guy like Tyrese Halliburton, assume he's going to play. I think, he's the most expensive guy on the team here. A lot of the usage runs through him here, clearly has the highest upside on the team, and hope that you end up getting a great Halliburton game. He plays, and it takes away from some of the other chalky value plays here and that are coming in at higher ownership, and maybe try to flip the build here a little bit. It seems like a lot of people are going to be using the Pacers for value, so I might go to them and instead say I'm going to use them for a pay-up option in Halliburton and hope we get that 85th percentile. You can actually click and look at his name here and go and see. And I mean, correlations are small in NBA, but he's negatively correlated to some of these more popular pieces here. So if he does get that upside outcome here, could come at the expense of some of these guys. You obviously have to adjust as news breaks, right? If we do end up getting close to that game and he gets ruled out, it's going to change everything. You're going to have to change your build here. But that's the way I think I would approach this. These situations are tough where, like, typically I like to count on a stud getting ruled out to let some of the value plays at low ownership open up. But these value plays are already going to be chalky. We're not going to be able to get that edge, at least on the Pacers side here tonight. So I think that's how I would attack this particular situation at lock, at least.
All right, let's do this for now. Let's take Mathurin. Let's bump him down, say, like 4 or 5 points. Let's get kind of aggressive. Let's bump Buddy Hield down 4 or 5 points also.
I'm just bumping these guys to their 25th here. So they're aggressive adjustments, but I like it.
Let's go. Let's kind of, flip this situation. Jordan Nwora, he got more run last game, I believe. I think we're at 28 minutes. Let's bump him up. Let's get a little bit more aggressive on him. And let's just say it's a weird game. Let's just say let's take Halliburton down a little bit. Let's just say he plays, but you often see like weird scripts come out in these Spurs games. It can happen for a variety of reasons. Blowout, just adjustments. You got these teams that are just Spurs are tanking. Maybe CJ McCollum comes in and he's cooking, and Rick Carlisle gives them some extra run. We know CJ McCollum when the ball is in his hands. TJ
McConnell?
Or TJ McCollum. Did I say CJ McCollum?
Yeah.
Maybe that's his brother. Yeah. Bump him up to like 23 points, like between his 75th and 85th.
Okay.
I'm just, we're kind of flipping the script here. And then same with Jalen Smith too. And these guys might not even hit, the build, but it's like, this is like the one game where I could see some of these scrubs just get there. So like, and then go to the Spurs side. Did you already bump up Bassey?
No, I didn't. Let's give him a bump here.
Yeah. So what we've done here is we've kind of flipped it. We've identified that we like Philly, or at least I like Philly, because we're playing on the narrative of these games that we've seen with Luka, Kyrie coming in. The Mavs have been worse defensively. I think not having Max Kleber too really has hurt them defensively. I think that game plays faster. I think we see an over type of script. So we're playing on that, and we're saying that this Pacers Spurs game kind of plays all funky, and we're just playing around just to see what the builds kind of look like. And then can you go back to the Warriors side real quick?
So we gave a couple guys some bumps as you were talking here before, just in that pace up spot here. Poole, Thompson, Draymond.
Yeah, people don't like to play Jordan Poole, but I do like him in the spot. I mean, Clay's kind of been the guy. Though I'd probably bump both of those. Yeah, I think that's fine how you have it.
Yeah.
Can you
go ahead?
Can you go to the first game, Toronto? And this is the game I'm definitely not as high on. Just, off the top of my head, I just think, Toronto now with this lineup, I think it's a much more fundamentally sound lineup with Pirtle in there. They're big, they're long, they can play good defense, they can make it tough, and I'm just the Wizards are annoying. So
yeah,
I'm definitely under on them. So
this is an interesting puzzle here tonight. I think there's a couple things going through my head. So first of all, if you're trying to get some lower ownership plays, look no further than the first game, right? I mean, this is going to be where you're getting on a 4-game slate, like sub 2% owned, Van Vliet, Beal, Siakam, right? Like these guys that have the upside there, obviously, there's going to be no ownership on these plays while everybody stacks up these 3 games here. On the flip side, the Spurs injury report is a bit of a mess here. Obviously, Popovich is always up to, doing something a little bit weird with the starting lineup here. I think if we're going to get really good projected plays in this slate somewhere, it is going to come from, we get Kelvin Johnson out, Trey Jones out, Branham out, and then a weird Popovich lineup right before lock that most of the field, or right before this game locks, that the field isn't adjusting to. So I have a couple thoughts. One, I like the idea of potentially like using a player from this early game and getting it as a way to, maybe you're throwing in a low-owned Pascal Siakam and hoping you get the upside game there, or just some lower-owned plays from here. But then making sure that you have a core of your lineup that does not lock until at least this Pacers-Spurs game locks. So I actually think it's a slate where I might maybe use some rules to do something like that, like make sure that I'm getting some exposure to this game here, just because I think there's low-owned opportunities here, but then also making sure that each lineup has, something like at least 3 players from either this game or this game, so you can react to that kind of Popovich news that could potentially come out there, because that, to me, it's not a slate where, it's a slate where late swap news is going to be valuable, but it's all going to come from one game pretty much, provided that we end up getting Joel Embiid in. So it's really an interesting one here, where I think you don't want to. I would almost say I'd scratch this game off, but I don't necessarily want to say I'm getting rid of all those low-owned opportunities, because it's not. Again, it's what I was talking about before. It is not as if the players playing in this game at 2% ownership are that much worse point per dollar values than the guys that are going 40-45% in all the other games on the slate.
Yeah, no, I get exactly what you're saying. And this is where, I kind of, this is where it comes down to your style too.
Yeah.
So like my style with this game on a 4-game slate would just be to like cross that game out, give me a little extra time to get all the news. And then you can do the exact opposite too. Like it's all right. So if I was playing the $15 100K to first, I wouldn't cross this game off. There's a few different scenarios. If my goal was I want to achieve as much leverage as possible with still having a very good build that, is a potentially winning build, I probably wouldn't cross them off. But for me, I like playing on what I'm looking at projections. I'm looking at matchups. I'm looking at many different things. And then obviously I have my gut feeling. That's how I play. And so my lean here is with both these teams healthy, I mean, Kristaps Porzingis is back. Kuzma has been struggling. Bradley Beal is priced up now finally. Mm-hmm. I can't play Gafford with Porzingis back. They like running out, Denny, Avdia, and they got Kispert that they give minutes to. And then on the Toronto side, you got Pirtle, who's right at 28 to 30 minutes. So I can't play him. But when Pirtle's in there, he takes away from Pascal Siakam's rebounding upside. So we haven't seen him hit a ceiling in forever. And then Fred VanVleet, there's this, dynamic between him and Scotty, who's running point half the time. So for me, it's like, gosh, it's just a cluster right now. Both teams healthy. I'm gonna, X them out and move on. That's kind of like my read on that situation. But when we do that, now let's rerun it. So we've made some adjustments. We're attacking the matchups that we talked about. I'm curious to see now, like when we first ran the cash build, we were getting a ton of Pacers and not as many Spurs guys, which is definitely fine. But we were getting a lot of Pacers guys in there. So now I'm curious. The Pacers chalk, we bumped them down. We bumped up, but we didn't over bump up some of the plays that were going to be lower on the Pacers side. So I'm curious to see what happens. Do we bump the Philly guys up?
We did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Embiid, Harden, Maxey. I gave Tobias Harris actually a little bit of a bump down. I think that's what you were saying there. But we can go back and bump it back up.
And that's working under the assumption that Maxey maybe slides in. I mean, how do you not start him after yesterday's performance? I mean, the guy looked incredible.
Yeah, so, I mean, real quick, somebody in chat put me onto this as well. So it looks like we already got some Spurs news. So Trey Jones is in, Devin Vassell is in as well. He was probable. So, it does – sometimes when you get these very early guys marked in, I think it does cast a little doubt on the other players that are questionable. It makes me think that Keldon Johnson and Branham are probably like true questionables here. So keep an eye on that throughout the day. But we do know Trey Jones in. So a little less news that we potentially have brewing there for the Spurs after lock. We don't get a lot of news doing this show here on Thursdays every week this early. So kind of fun. We get to do a little bit of live before lock kind of stuff here.
So a couple things on that note. So Trey Jones hasn't played. So he's missed I think 6 or 7 games. Mm-hmm. And then he played against the Hawks. He played 24 minutes. And before that, he had missed about 4 or 5 games. So the thing with the Spurs that we're going to see if Branham is out, if Keldon, I mean, it's going to be kind of wild, depending on that last news there. But I don't think they're wanting to put Devin Vassell. They're not going to push him. He hasn't played him forever, so he's likely to be on a minute, some type of minutes restriction. I still think that they want to showcase Charles Bassey. We saw Blake Wesley have a really good game, but again, he played. So the thing with the Spurs that we could definitely see is So one, just making this simple. If any Spurs player is going to be mega chalk, I'm going to bump them down. I'm not saying I'm fading them. I'm going to bump them down. I'm going to bump them down a few points. I probably, hindsight's always 20/20. I should have probably done this with Jared Vanderbilt yesterday because I was so Cam Johnson was I felt he was the best play on the slate, and I just felt it was a pivot off of Tobias Harris. I could have played both of them easily. It would have got me to fade Vanderbilt. If I would have done that and had Maxey and had Maxey and then Schroeder, I would have been set up very well. So sometimes not full fading, but just if this guy gets 2 or 3 points less. I did this with Terry Rozier yesterday, a really good example. Everyone had him between 40 and about 43 projection-wise. I bumped him down to 37. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you know what? I think projections are a little too confident in him. Terry Rozier's having a bad year. Why is it going to change here? He's going to have the same rotation. I get the usage shifts and all of that, but it was still a spot where Phoenix has some good defenders. They're obviously going to try to take away Terry Rozier. That's what they did. I think he finished with 33 or 34. I know he finished under his projection, but sometimes when you just move those chalk guys down a few points, then you look at the lineups, it makes things really interesting.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense, right? I mean, embrace the volatility at this point in the season for a bad tanking team that also has a ton of injury news pending, right? If the field is going to assume that this is a clear situation and we get 30% Trey Jones or something like that now that he's in, looks a little underpriced based on average projections. I love the idea of being under in that. And you can see we're actually getting that here because we already bumped him down. One of the other things you can do, right, is if you're trying to say, I really want to, embrace volatility and just kind of hope we get some chaos with this Spurs rotation, check out the correlations, right? If you're already fading Trey Jones, you're under on that. Who are the guys that maybe can benefit the most from that if we get something unique for the Spurs? Branham, if he plays. Charles Bassey, a guy you're already on, right? Negatively correlated to Trey Jones. Miles Turner on the other side, actually, another name you already mentioned here. Makes sense, maybe if Miles Turner is getting that big defensive performance there, a lot of block shots, it's going to affect the guys that are trying to drive the paint, move the ball around there. Blake Wesley, right? A guy that's projecting for like 8 points right now. This is a situation where it's a rotations thing, right? We're assuming that he's not going to play very much. If you disagree with that premise or just want to play an angle where the rotation's different here, you can give a guy like this a very significant bump. Even just cap his exposure, get him in 10 or 15% of your lineups, and get another guy in there that kind of double fades that Trey Jones news there. So I really, on a 4-game slate, again, it's a 3-game for the way that we've built our lineups here. You have time to look and really dive into some of these rotations and dig into these guys. So I think it's a good opportunity to do stuff like that. But let's take a look at this build here.
Yeah. Real quick, Willie K. I watched that game real closely. He played 38 minutes. He played his normal rotation. 30. Rosie, I'm a Scary Terry fan. I really am. There's something with the Hornets, man. The organization, they just I don't know if it's like I don't know what it is. It seems like people go there to regress. I think when he was at Boston, he just looked so much stronger. It's tough because my boy Bryce McGowan's is on that team too, and now it has an awesome contract, but for him. But hopefully that team gets things going. But it's MJ. We saw Matty Ice. What's up, my man? Matty Ice 704. Always in chat. Appreciate you. Yeah, look at some of these builds, and we're not saying like play these scrub Pacers guys. It's just we're trying to find ways like what is it doing for us? Well, some of these punt value plays, what they're doing is allowing us to get that Harden, Embiid, maxi stack that we were talking about. Like I'm like, when do I play studs together that are on the same team? When I do it when you see kind of a positive correlation there. Can you actually be interested? If you click Harden,
let's do Harden.
Because my read on it could be wrong. When you think about the Harden and Embiid two-man game, so they negatively correlate just a little bit. And that's a really good point. That's a really good point there too.
So
who correlates the best with James Harden? I guess no one really does.
Yeah, it's pretty rare to see very strong positive correlations in NBA. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of one. Things you can see is like a guy might correlate a little bit to a stud on the other team. If you do kind of get that where both teams are going off, the game's going well over the total, something like that. Sometimes you'll also see some of these guys correlate actually pretty well with like the bench guys on their own team. That could be a variety of things. If like trying to imagine a game script here where maybe Embiid gets in foul trouble, just doesn't have a good game overall, you end up in a situation where it's like James Harden plus some bench guys trying to carry the Sixers or something like that. So a lot of times not a lot of strong positive correlations there in NBA. But, on the flip side, it is just a 4-game NBA slate. The negative correlation of Harden and Embiid here is pretty small. I think, especially on a slate where it's just hard to find guys to pay up for, I don't have any problem playing those guys together.
Yeah, I mean, it's more so like, man, it just their price is kind of nice too. Like Harden at 9.5 just seems too like. Am I playing? I mean, I guess you could create the argument. Would you go Kyrie and Embiid or James Harden and Embiid? Harden's 9.5, Kyrie is 9.4. Well, so just talking through that, Kyrie's playing next to Luka. It's going to be hard for Kyrie to achieve his ceiling. My kind of theory and thought behind, Harden and Embiid is you got a lot of plays where Harden's going to be looking at Embiid to, and you're going to get assist potentials, out of him. So while it isn't I get it in the Sims, while it's not as strong of a correlation as kind of what I thought, just by, kind of watching them play, it does make sense. So it is kind of an interesting thing to discuss, but either way, I think Philly is in a really nice spot. And then it's going to come down to the Pacers. And then we do got to keep an eye on the Spurs. It's just the Spurs. If any of them are projected to be chalk, I'm going to bump them down a little bit. And then the only other rule so if you pull up Jordan Poole, I love that little correlation thing. I would guess that he negatively correlates the most with Klay Thompson.
Pretty strong negative correlation. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these Warriors here, DiVincenzo, a negative correlation as well. But yeah, definitely a negative correlation there.
Does anyone positively correlate with Poole? I mean, he's...
Yeah, so, I mean, here's an example of what I was talking about. So, and that's what, so when you do get that upside outcome for this game, it's going well over the total there. All right, Poole and Paul George going back and forth, Kawhi Leonard. Like, basically, a lot of these Clippers guys, rotations players, starters here, all correlate pretty positively to Jordan Poole. So maybe an opportunity to set up a game stack there as well. I mean, I don't think that the Clippers are going to be very popular. They're pretty fairly, maybe slightly overpriced, a lot of these guys in the lineup. We're not getting a lot of them here. You mentioned pace in that game, right? Pace is going to affect both teams. I only bumped the Warriors in this build. I think it would make sense. Go back, maybe bump up some of those Clippers there as well if we were running another build here.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm definitely with you there. Do we want to run one more, or do we want to flip flop over to MMA?
Yeah, I mean, let me a couple other things. I just wanted to.
One more.
I think one more. I think this slate is interesting here. I'm having fun talking about this one here. A couple other things I just wanted to mention. An interesting situation here. I do think you mentioned Dallas. I think they're interesting options. It's going to be very hard for people to pay for Luka tonight. I actually don't think he's going to be very popular. I might actually take the under on 18.27 percentage points owned. Maybe, I'm not sure. People end up just paying for the top guy in the pool. But anytime you've got a guy like Luka on the slate, especially where he's not going to be the most popular option, I think it's interesting to just kind of jam some exposure there and just see if you can get a guy with 80-point upside that's sub 20% owned here. The other thing I would explore is setting some rules to limit exposure to some of these teams. We saw in the cash build, Warriors, Pacers, Sixers, 3 stacks are going to be the most popular construction on the slate tonight, right? That's going to be where the projections take people. We, in this build, are getting there in a different way, which I think is great, right? We're playing TJ McConnell. We're playing Jalen Smith. We're playing some of these less popular plays in there. But it is a popular construction, at least with the teams that we're looking at here. So I think another interesting angle would be to look and see, can we get a Maverick into these lineups? Can we get a Clipper into these lineups here? Get a little bit different there with the construction. So
I like that. And, I mean, with Russ, it comes down to, I think the rotation is going to be a little bit unpredictable. Ty Lue took him out. I mean, I think he missed like 5 straight shots in a row, but he was racking up the peripheral stats. But Paul George, the price is nice, and Kawhi Leonard is playing a lot of minutes. And that game should be competitive. And it's not like either team right now has been that good defensively. And then Josh in the chat, Embiid going to sit, in his opinion. I don't. Let me. I'm trying to see. Never mind. I was thinking Halliburton. I mean, I think it's the ESPN game or TNT, whichever it is tonight, the national televised game. I mean, Embiid, if he can play, I think he would play here in this spot. I mean, if they could go after getting a win, down in Miami, come here and get a win and put Dallas in absolute shambles. That means Luka and Kyrie now have another loss on the books. I mean, that would just be huge for Philly. So, I mean, it's a good point with the spread, but again, he's questionable. If you think that spread's off and indicates that Embiid is not playing, I would hop on the Philly side here. I would take their side. That's the way I would play it. I think he plays though, and I think this game is just really interesting.
Yeah, I did a couple things here. I gave Luka and Kyrie a little bit of a bump. I think we're under projecting them a little bit. It seems
let's take Luka. Let's go. Since we like this game, we've seen these games. Just think about it. Like the Mavs have something wrong defensively, obviously. And when you think about good defensive teams, it's, communication, hustle, switching, and that's what creates a good defensive team. So when you get new players onto a team, it takes time to build that chemistry. But they have the offensive talent to keep the game close. So I think we're going to see points back and forth. Let's go 75th percentile with both Luka and Kyrie.
Perfect. Yeah, and I mean, you can see right away the upside on these guys, right? I mean, we're talking about a 75th of 65.5 points. I mean, that if he hits that point total, you might just need Luka in your lineup to take something down tonight and figure out what the value plays are that fill out that lineup to make it work. So I like that. I did set a rule as well to avoid both of them in the lineup together, and gave a little bump to those Clippers guys as well. Added Russ to that rule as well. I think this is not an unfair projection for Russ. I know a little bit of minutes volatility there, but I do want to give him a chance to show up in some lineups here. So I gave him a little bit of a bump.
I still think he's very much in play in tournaments. He in 27 minutes, he was 3 rebounds shy from a triple-double. That was in 27 minutes. If he comes in, all right, here's the thing about Ty Lue. If he comes in and if Russ is making good decisions, which, again, that's a tall ask, for some reason, he just he doesn't understand that his game is not the same as where he was 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's not. But in his mind, he doesn't see that. So he's still going to do those same things. And that's where that bad decision-making comes in. And so, but if he comes in, he's hitting some shots, Ty Lue's going to let him play. So it's a very risky play, but I definitely think he's in play in tournament-wise.
Yeah, so I ran another build here just to get an idea of how things are looking. I'm starting to like the way that these look quite a bit. We're still getting some more unique value plays here popping up on some of the teams with just some volatility there. But we start to see, Paul George get tossed into the lineup here. Luka's in our second lineup in our pool here. One thing I wanted to look at is just, let's go back to the cash build real quick. So our top builds here, 180% ownership. Let's look. I want to see what we were at with the cash build. So 250% ownership on the top cash build, 240% ownership. So just by, playing a different angle on some of these teams, giving some bumps to some of these guys that, might be a little underprojected, a little unpopular tonight, we've built some lineups that are still projecting really well at quite a bit lower ownership here without having to make any stands on plays that I think just have no shot tonight. So I like the way that these are coming out quite a bit.
Yeah, I do too. And I like Josh. I like your mention. Maxi Kleber played 24 minutes. They're going to need him for defense tonight. So I like that call. I am not a huge fan of his, but mainly it's if he's going to be mega chalk. He never pans out as chalk. So yeah. But I only got about 10 more minutes. Let's go to MMA real quick, because I wanted to see. This is. I haven't done a lot of research yet. I'm gonna, obviously wait till our guy Titletown, who runs our MMA product, until he gets all of his stuff out. But I did read a few interesting things, and so I kind of have, at least for the John Jones and the main event. One thing with MMA, usually the main event is chalk. People, sometimes people will play both pieces from the cash guys will play those two fighters against each other and just try to. Take a loss, take a win, and try to scoop up all the points. From what I've read, this main event, while it's getting hyped up, everyone's excited. I mean, I'm excited to see John Jones, see the way he can do. The stuff I've read that I think is pretty sharp is this fight might be pretty boring, more strategic, less striking, more feeling each other out. Could be a pretty boring fight, and it could be a spot where we could fade the main event, or at least be under. But I haven't used Saber yet. So when I haven't MME'd in MMA in a while, usually it's just running one build. It's just tough during NBA season to get into it. But I wanted to at least see, how the Sims are looking.
Yeah. No, and it's a cool sport. It is a perfect sport for simulation. So this is a round by round simulator, right? We are actually going through and simulating these out just like we do for other sports. You can see some interesting stuff here. Sometimes just clicking on names and just kind of looking at what the distributions look like. A lot of times you end up getting this U-shaped distribution, almost similar to something like golf, where you've got losing the fight, losing inside the distance here down here. the average projection is actually a pretty unpopular outcome in terms of it being likely to happen. And then the upside, right? They win the fight and then they win by, knockout or submission or something like that. So very cool sim to play around with here. I think, I know we're a little short on time here. I think we should just get into like a tournament build and just kind of see what things look like. What do you think?
Let's run one build. I just want to see it. We can give high level overview of MMA because it's going to be, it should be a fun card.
And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to turn down ownership fade. I do recommend doing that for your very first build. I don't think you necessarily have to take it all the way to 0. Ownership fade, I think, is useful for your final build, especially if you're not making other adjustments or maybe trying to figure out a way to get a little bit different on your own. For the first build, though, just so we can get an idea of what's going on here, I'm going to turn it down just so we can look at the raw sims and basically see what we're getting out of here. So,
yeah, I like it.
Yeah, our data scientist Will has worked really hard on these sims. I know he's really proud of them. They're his baby here at Sabersim. So a very powerful tool, right? Anytime we have a sport where average projections just really don't tell the whole story, you start talking about something that's simulating out the fights is really helpful. So I'm excited to see how this looks here.
Yeah, and so this is the interesting thing. Like, the Jones. Gain at 7.8K. Like I get it, but I just think this fight could be more feeling each other out. Like I don't see it being like go nuts, go crazy, from like an elite fight that you'd want to target where you have a lot of striking, a lot of upside. So it's gonna be interesting. But who in the main? All right, so we're getting more, or actually, 38%. What's the total ownership that we're getting from just the main event? It looks like 70.
Yeah, so a little under 50%, and then so about 3 out of every 4, have one fighter from the main event there.
And it auto, so like you're never going to get a fighter versus another fighter, right?
That is
rules are auto built in there. Are you okay? You have to manually change it.
And I think, 14 fights right now. I think we're still scheduled for 14 fights. If that changes, I know last week it came down to a pretty small card. If that changes, I think you can start talking about allowing opposing fighters when you get down to like maybe a 9-fight card or less is where I typically start to think about doing that. But if we get 14 fights on Saturday, I don't think you really need to do that. I'm not really looking at like double stacks of the main event or something like that for tournament builds.
So the one thing, so here's kind of what I've done in the past when I've MME'd using Saber. So like I always pull up Titletown's playbook. I go through that, and honestly, I just I read his notes, and because I don't know the fighters that well. It's not something I study that often, but I do love watching it. And what I'll do is just this is the sport where I use the min and max more than any other. Maybe this in NASCAR. Is that how so like if he really likes a guy, instead of like completely changing the projection, I'll go through there and I'll set a min and max. I never like my strategy. I usually have my max at about 70%. I don't know if that's just my personal preference, but
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think, it's high volatility sport, high variance sport. So being very heavily exposed to one fighter can be a little bit dangerous unless you're willing to, basically lose all your entries on one fight there. I do agree. Be careful with projection adjustments in MMA. I wouldn't say don't do them at all, but take a very light touch. The main reason why is because when you adjust a projection, you are also adjusting all of the percentiles along with it, which means you are adjusting the situations where the fighter wins with a knockout or a submission or something like that. So if you bump, somebody up 10 points, you're also bumping up their 99th percentile 10 points. And because MMA is so binary, right? They're either going to win, they're going to lose. Those sims are actually popping up quite a bit. Basically, what I'm trying to say is projection updates will have a very big impact in MMA. So light touch there if you're going to do that. I don't hate it. I don't think anything's wrong with doing that, but I think using the exposures in a build is a little bit of a safer way to kind of manage and get what you're looking for there. And you'll typically find your pool in a 1500 build on default settings will be very diverse, right? It
makes sense.
Yeah.
If you think about it, MMA is a great sport for just simulations because there's so many different possible outcomes. Like you said, like a first round knockout. You're going to score, an insane amount of points compared to if it's a decision, at the very end. So I mean, there's so many different outcomes. How are you guys developing kind of your projections? Is it a lot of it odds based?
Yeah, I believe
guess this
so.
might be a question for
for Will. I'd have to check
we'll
in
do
with
that
him.
another time. We'll do that another time.
Yeah, we do up on our Sabersim YouTube channel. I interviewed Will last year after we put our MMA Sims out for the first time and broke it down, and I just can't remember that video as much. But that's up on our YouTube channel if anybody wants to get a little bit of a deep dive into how the sim works here. I know that Will does use his own Sims to do a lot of MMA betting. So I am pretty sure we are not heavily odds based because he's using the model to beat Vegas odds on a lot of these. So
gotcha.
Yeah, but it is.
I like it.
It's round by round. It does do a really good job as well of keeping track of fight styles. So in general, we'll do a good job of kind of keeping track of the pace of a fight. Whether guys are on the ground fighters or strikers or that kind of stuff. So again, I think it's pretty clear I'm not the MMA expert here, right? But anyway, that's how the sim works.
I think my one stand, I think it's going to be a really fun card to multi-enter, and I think my stand's going to be just initially. I mean, we got a few days before this, but it's being under on the main event. So we'll see. It could absolutely bury me and punish me because 5 rounds, obviously. Actually, there's 2 main events. So right? I believe so. We got Shevchenko. Can you click on her real quick?
Yes.
Yeah, she just.
Let me bring this back
she's
down.
Priced way up. She's got to be a heavy favorite.
Yeah, so about even with the field there with both the actual lineups here and the pool exposure. So not a strong stand one or the other. That actually kind of surprises me a little bit because she is a fighter that in general our model does tend to really like.
I think from what I read, her opponent likes to throw too. So that would be an interesting one.
Yeah, and we're actually
a heavy dog
over there on Grasso here. So 28%. So definitely kind of, another fight that we are getting a lot of exposure to here, both sides, but definitely on the dog a little bit in that one.
All right. Well, very good. Good stuff. All right, Jordan, as I always ask you each and every week, is there anything new that the people could be expecting over at Sabersim that's up and coming?
Yeah, been teasing a couple things the last few weeks. That work's still in progress. Some updates just to the app overall. Baseball coming up, obviously. New one for you guys here. We have some changes coming to SaberScore and the way that we handle ownership in the app. One of the things that we really want to do is making sure that we're handling ownership in the part of the process where it matters, which is really what lineups you are selecting from your pool, less so the lineups that you are building. And we want to make some improvements there. So that stuff is coming soon. We actually, on our Behind the Sims podcast on Sabersim, released an episode talking about that a little bit there. I think that will go out to the live app here in the next week or so. So it should really, what it'll do is it'll allow us to be a little bit more accurately aggressive towards ownership, I think is the right way to look at it here. So pretty exciting stuff. I think it'll increase just the quality of lineups overall right off the bat when that goes live, but also give you guys a little bit more stuff to play with. So yeah, that's probably the big thing on our end that we're working on right now.
Yeah, I love it. Your team over there, you guys are awesome. Always, looking for ways to make the product better. I know us over at Run Pure Sports, we appreciate that. Because obviously we use it each and every day, especially myself. So I mean, it's basically like my hub throughout the day. Like I'm using that. I'm kind of old school, I like to write my notes down. I have my process, but I then translate that into Sabersim, especially for NBA. So absolutely love it. Good stuff as always, Jordan. But we do have to get out of here. Again, if you're not a member yet, you can use the code AP15. It's going to get you 15% off your payment over here at Run Pure Sports. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe. Helps us out very much. With that, I'm AP. That's Jordan. Let's run Pure.